Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, A Study in Genius, Germany, and Damnation. Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, The Life of the German Composer Adrian Leverkühn as Told by a Friend, 1947, is one of the most complex and profound novels of the 20th century. A modern reimagining of the Faust legend, the book serves simultaneously as a fictional biography, a meditation on art and creativity, a philosophical treatise, and an allegory of Germany's cultural and political downfall in the early 20th century. Written in exile during World War II, Mann's novel reflects the deep anxieties of the time, especially the rise of Nazism and the moral compromises of intellectuals and artists under totalitarian regimes. Structure and narrative voice. The novel is structured as a biography written by Serinus Zeitblom, a mild-mannered and deeply moralistic humanist who recounts the life of his childhood friend, Adrian Leverkühn. Zeitblom's voice, often self-effacing and uncertain, contrasts sharply with the radical and ultimately tragic genius of Leverkühn. Through this narrative frame, Mann explores the limitations of rationality and humanism when faced with the seductive forces of irrationalism and destruction. Zeitblom's narration is not simply a literary device. It represents the voice of the older German tradition, rooted in classical education, moral reflection, and cautious optimism, that watched helplessly as the country descended into barbarism. His account is colored by hindsight and guilt, mirroring Mann's own complex relationship with German culture and his position as an intellectual émigré during the Nazi era. Adrian Leverkühn and the Faustian Pact. Adrian Leverkühn is portrayed as a musical genius of unparalleled originality, yet his creativity is inextricably bound to personal suffering, isolation, and ultimately madness. In a central episode, Leverkühn makes a metaphorical or possibly real pact with the devil. This pact, reminiscent of the legend of Faust and Goethe's treatment of it, guarantees him 24 years of extraordinary creative power in exchange for his soul and emotional sterility. The moment is key. The narrator recounts Leverkühn's confession of this pact with deep ambiguity, leaving readers uncertain whether it is a delusion born from syphilitic madness or a metaphysical reality. The syphilis Leverkühn contracts, possibly on purpose as a form of self-damnation, is symbolic of the link between creativity and disease, between genius and suffering. Mann draws on contemporary medical and psychoanalytic theories of degeneration, but also invokes older ideas of the artist as a cursed figure who must suffer for the world's beauty. Music, modernism, and the problem of art. Mann, with help from the philosopher Theodor W. Adorno, constructed in Leverkühn a fictional composer whose development mirrors the historical trajectory of modern music. His compositions resemble the innovations of Arnold Schoenberg and other atonal composers, while his aesthetic philosophy reflects the tension between structure and chaos, tradition and revolution. Leverkühn seeks to go beyond romanticism, embracing an anti-humanistic view of art that rejects emotion and instead aspires to cold, formal perfection. His rejection of love and human connection is not just personal, it is ideological. In this way, his music becomes a vehicle for Mann to explore broader questions about the role of art in a morally disordered world. Is beauty possible in the face of horror? Can genius be separated from ethical responsibility? This concern becomes even more pressing in light of the historical context. The novel was written during the years when Germany, the land of Goethe, Beethoven, and Kant, descended into the horrors of fascism and genocide. Leverkühn's aesthetic and moral descent parallels that of his homeland. Germany and the allegory of decline. More than a biography of a tormented artist, Dr. Faustus is an allegory of Germany's spiritual collapse. Adrian Leverkühn, with his cold brilliance and descent into madness, stands in for the German nation, which sacrificed its humanistic traditions and moral compass for the sake of power, glory, and a perverted notion of destiny. The novel is filled with references to German intellectual history, including Luther, Nietzsche, Goethe, and Schopenhauer. Mann uses these references not merely to show off erudition, but to suggest that the seeds of Nazism lay deep within the German cultural psyche. Leverkühn's rejection of bourgeois morality, his disdain for democracy, and his embrace of radical transgression mirror the ideological justifications of National Socialism. The devil in the novel becomes not just a metaphysical figure, but a symbol of the temptation toward nihilism and power that seduced Germany. In one of the most chilling passages, The devil speaks in the language of bureaucracy and ideology, warning against humanism, pity, and progress, the very values that man himself upheld. This vision of evil is far more terrifying than Goethe's Mephistopheles. It is abstract, impersonal, and internalized. The tragedy of isolation. Isolation, both emotional and intellectual, is a central theme in Dr. Faustus. Leverkusen deliberately cuts himself off from others to preserve his genius, but this isolation becomes his undoing. His inability to love or connect is not merely a personal tragedy, but emblematic of the broader cultural crisis man saw in modernity. The spiritual loneliness that haunts Leverkusen is mirrored in the alienation of a society that has lost its moral bearings. The character of Zeitblom, while far less gifted, is emotionally engaged, loyal, and capable of human connection. Through this contrast, Mann poses a subtle critique of the cult of genius. Greatness bought at the cost of humanity may not be worth the price. This message resonates particularly in light of the atrocities committed by those who saw themselves as superior, as visionaries shaping a new world order. Language and style. Thomas Mann's style in Dr. Faustus is dense, elusive, and deliberately archaic. The novel is filled with philosophical digressions, theological discussions, and musical analyses. This can make the text challenging, but it also reflects Mann's belief in the novel as a repository of cultural memory, a place where the highest forms of knowledge, tradition, and inquiry can coexist. At times, Mann parodies the heavy, scholarly German prose tradition, particularly through Zeitblom's voice, who is excessively modest and long-winded. Yet this self-parody is part of the novel's charm. Mann is aware of the limits of intellectualism, even as he exemplifies it. Legacy and interpretation. Since its publication, Dr. Faustus has been recognized as one of Thomas Mann's greatest achievements. It represents the culmination of his lifelong engagement with German culture, his deep ambivalence toward modernity, and his capacity to merge myth, music, and politics into a single, unified narrative. Scholars have interpreted the novel in many ways. As a warning about the dangers of aestheticism divorced from ethics, as a critique of Germany's descent into fascism, as a psychological portrait of the tortured artist, and even as a meditation on the theological concept of damnation in a secular age. Mann himself said that the novel was his divining rod, seeking out the roots of evil in the soul of Germany. In this way, Dr. Faustus is not just a historical document or a work of fiction, it is a moral and philosophical reckoning with the 20th century's darkest possibilities. Conclusion. Dr. Faustus remains a haunting and intellectually demanding novel that confronts readers with the perennial tension between art and morality, genius and humanity, reason and madness. In Adrian Leverkusen's tragic tale, Thomas Mann offers a profound allegory of cultural and personal damnation, one that still resonates in our time. As a meditation on the costs of ambition, the seductions of ideology, and the responsibilities of the artist, it stands as one of the most important literary works of the modern era.